As Mr. Telmeyer explained, I've been working for the Insurance Association of Turkey, and I'm going to present you industry's point of view for consumer protection and data protection regulations in Turkey, actually. But in order to do that, first of all, I would like to explain you the current situation, the market situation in Turkey overall, to give you an idea about where we are in terms of Consumer Protection and Data Protection Act. So, in Turkey we have 63 insurance companies altogether. They're all members of the association. Insurance Association of Turkey is established by law, and all the insurance companies has to be a member as soon as they establish. In Turkey, the insurance companies operate either as non-life insurance companies or life insurance companies. We don't have any composite companies. We have 2 reinsurance companies currently operating in Turkey. If you look at the total size of the insurance industry in Turkey, as of third quarter of 2017, we have about 40.5 billion US dollars assets, and we produced a premium of about 11.5 billion US dollars premiums. This was in 2016, and in 2017 we had some 13.1 billion US dollar premium production. For those of you who are familiar with the Turkish market, we had a slight increase from the last year's premium production, but because this is due to the situation in the MTPL market, maybe you are aware of it. There is some introduction of tariff regulation in Turkey last year by the regulator. Due to this tariff regulation, we had a slight decrease we have a sharp decrease in the premium production in the non-life branches especially. So it brought us in the overall 14% increase in premium production. If you look at the production figures over the years, as you see from 2011 onwards, we see a steady increase in the premium production over the years, which makes the combined aggregate growth ratio about 14%. But if you look at this figure in real terms, in US dollars, I calculated in this graph, we see that the figures are not growing actually, as it was in the previous slide in inflated numbers. We see a slight increase, but in US dollar terms we don't see much increase. So it's about 10 billion US dollars terms. Last year, another important novelty happened in the industry, which was the introduction of auto-enrollment. In the morning session, we talked about occupational pension funds. We had third pillar pension funds in Turkey, which was described as voluntary pension funds. It was introduced in 2003, and it has grown quite steadily. And we had about a fund of about 21 billion US dollars accumulated in the funds. And in terms of number of participants, we have almost 7 million participants in the system. But for our auto-enrollment, as I said, it is in the very early stages, and we just have 500 million funds in the auto-enrollment, and number of participants just 3.5 million. But we are planning to add some more 6 million employees into the system by the end of 2019. This slide is important for me because it shows the penetration and density in comparison with the European markets. We usually compare and contrast Turkish market with the European insurance market, and because it is important because we emulate the laws and regulations from the European market, especially in consumer protection data and other regulations concerning insurance business. We emulate insurance regulations from European countries, European directives we are following. But if you look at the market, in the comparison, we see that there's quite a gap between European insurance markets and Turkish insurance market. If you look at the graph on the left-hand side, this shows the insurance penetration in European countries, about 7% of the GDPs. However, in Turkey, we are just about 1.6 of the overall GDP. We see that the gap is basically caused by the life insurance, as you see from here. And this has important implications for the Consumer Protection Act, because in Turkey, credit life line business is dominating the life insurance business in general. And when Consumer Protection Act was brought into act, it hit mostly the credit life insurance and other insurance businesses linked with the credit line. So it is very important that to take into consideration the market situation when you are introducing certain regulations, especially for the countries with developing insurance market like us. The other graph shows the insurance density. It means that the per capita insurance premium production per person in Europe, as we see, is about $1,600 is in US dollars terms, and in Turkey, again, we say that we are about only 165. And in life insurance business, as you see, it is the most affected by the Consumer Protection Act. This is only $21 per person. And private pensions, this is the area which hasn't been affected by Consumer Protection Act or Private Personal Data Act yet. But we are just waiting for any changes to happen, any new regulations to happen anytime soon. And when we compare it with the OECD averages, again, we see that there's a huge difference between OECD countries and Turkey. If we look at the insurance place in the financial system, as in the European countries, the financial system in Turkey is dominated by the banks. It is clearly seen in here from the graphs. It's 87%, sorry, is dominated by the banks, but the insurance is the second in the overall financial system. So we can say that insurance is the most developed after the banking system when compared to other financial instruments. Although it is small, it has a very important role in the Turkish economy. It is important in terms of attracting foreign direct investment, and it provides coverage for the big projects that happened in the recent years in Turkey. For example, the railway system under the Bosphorus and the bridge over the Bosphorus. These three big projects were all covered by the Turkish insurance companies. We pay for the losses. These are the claims paid by the insurance companies, and in life insurance business, and also in TCIP. We have a huge pool in TCIP with a big claims potential, and in agricultural insurance pool as well. This is the total size of the funds in terms of US dollars. It's about 33 billion US dollars funds provided for the economy. This is important because Turkish economy is a developing economy, is a very dynamic economy, and we need long-term funds to finance these new projects. So how the Consumer Protection Law affected insurance regulation? Before the Consumer Protection Act in 2014, we didn't have any definition of consumer in Turkish legislation, interestingly enough. It wasn't defined in the commercial law, neither in the insurance supervision law. So there was no definition of consumer in the Turkish legislation at all. It was first introduced in 2003. And it was replaced, this Consumer Protection Act was replaced in 2014. And it had two specific articles which are directly related to insurance business. And it has changed the way the insurance companies do business in Turkey. So what did Consumer Protection Act bring for insurance companies? It especially regulated the line of business in credit lines, credit-linked insurance businesses. With these two articles, 28 and 39, it stipulated written and overt consent of the credit holder. We don't know how to do this as insurance companies, written and overt consent, because each time it requires a written and signed declaration by the side of the policy holder. And the other important point is creditors shall not require insurance as a prerequisite, because before the enactment of this law, the banks or the financial credit institutions were requiring insurance as a prerequisite to issue a loan to the customers. And it changed completely after this law. And another important novelty was a credit holder now can choose the insurance company freely, independent of the credit institution. So you don't have to take the insurance from the bank's insurance company or captive company or the bank is working with. You can buy your insurance from any company and you can provide it with the bank, then they have to accept it. And also, it has brought some very cumbersome disclosure procedures. We didn't used to have that many pages of forms to fulfill before applying for the credit or for the insurance. So it added the operational expenses of the insurance companies considerably. This may seem just a few lines, but believe me, it changed the overall insurance scenery in Turkey. It made it really, really difficult to operate in the Turkish market, and it increased the costs of the insurance companies radically. So it is very specific. Although in European directives, I see that when I look at European directives, it's very general. It sets the general framework. As long as it protects the insurance, protects the rights and interests of the policyholder, it is fine. But in Turkey, the regulation and the other regulation based upon this act issued later on very specifically defines how to design insurance policies, and it is very much a restraining insurance business in Turkey. For instance, we mentioned about payment protection insurance in the morning. Payment protection insurance is very specific because the sum insured is changing. For instance, in the credit card protection, the sum insured and the duration of the insurance is changing. It's not in line with the duration and the sum of the loan. So our legislation is very much designed to regulate the conventional credit lines. So it's not complying with these products are not complying with the Consumer Protection Act, and it constitutes a huge problem for the insurance companies currently operating in these branches in Turkey. On the other hand, CPI, the Consumer Protection Act, is not compatible with digital insurance. Now, more and more insurance companies want to do business through digital distribution channels, but the written and signed consent of the policyholder restricts us in many ways because it doesn't recognize other ways of approval instead of signed signature. So each time we want to develop a new product which is going to be distributed via digital channels, we cannot do it because it is not allowed by the law. And after even if you just if you just manage to distribute it by digital channels and just say that you take the signed approval of the policyholder, you still have to give the policies in a signed and printed way. I believe that it is the same in European. Sorry, is it the same in the European? Okay, so in that sense, it's very restrictive in doing business in a digital way too. So on top of that, we had Data Protection Act, which was enacted in 2016. And there's an independent board was established to regulate the protection of personal data. We want this increased regulation we have to comply with further than the Consumer Protection Act. As an association, we demanded exemption from accessing personal health data, sensitive data, to keep them, to process, and to share them with the trusted third parties, with the partners. We're still in ongoing discussions with the board, with the head of the board, just to allow us to do these 4 points. In order to do, just for doing insurance business, just for risk assessment, just for the underwriting purposes, because otherwise it's not possible to do the health insurance and group insurance policies. Now, we used to sell through telephone sales, insurance policies, group insurance policies, individual insurance policies, but due to this Act for Protection of Personal Data Act, it's not possible to do this via phone. So many companies stopped their operations via telephone, and they're doing it via only conventional means. The importance of Consumer Protection Act is really about development of the insurance market in Turkey, because insurance market in Turkey is dominated by conventional products like MTPL, and it is very much dominated by the agencies. The alternative distribution channels are not finding their spaces to grow. So we want to grow these alternative channels of distribution, especially digital channels. But the Consumer Protection Act and also Data Protection Act, they don't allow us to develop these alternative distribution channels. And it is important for the Turkish, as I showed you at the beginning, the penetration levels are very low, and the 40% of the premiums produced come from MTPL. So we want to develop new areas of insurance lines, especially health insurance business. Complementary health insurance business is very important. It has gained very importance in the recently because of the social security system not providing health coverage for all people. So we want to develop these branches and life insurance as well. And only way to develop this, not only way, but there's a big potential to develop this through digital channels or alternative channels. And even the salesperson, direct sales teams of the insurance companies want to go to the field, and they want to do the job paperless, because there are so many pages, forms to carry with them. They go them, carry them, and then they just get them signed, everything, and they're very cumbersome. And we want to just be free of these paperwork and digitalization. We want to use more digital channels to develop the businesses in alternative in alternative insurance lines, so that we can just be free of at least these conventional insurance lines like MTPL businesses. So Consumer Protection and Data Protection Act actually prevented our chances to develop in these respects. So we just consider both these acts as we're restraining in terms of developing insurance business, especially in an insurance market like Turkish market, which is developing and which has a huge potential to go further. Consumer protection, yes, it has to protect policyholders, but we think that it shouldn't restrict the business. And under the regulations of very specific, very detailed articles of the both laws and other subsidiary regulations based upon these two acts, they are very specific and in very detail they regulate the business. It's very hard to do business. We need to be comply with the law very soon because the deadline is approaching, and all the companies are just working hard just to delete the personal data and to keep up with the new regulation requirements. So as an association, we are trying to, we've been lobbying with the authority, with the board, data protection board, to explain that our point of view, that some of the regulations are not actually in line with the realities of the insurance business in Turkey. So we try to explain them that it has to be not loosened, but it has to give some room to do insurance business, especially the keeping health data, sensitive data, just for the purposes of processing them, keeping them for the purpose of underwriting and risk assessment purposes. We've been still discussing with them. We are hoping to have some results out of it. And this is the importance of consumer protection and data protection for Turkey. Thank you very much for listening.